in Berkeley. There's always been blacks in Berkeley. Now, were they desired to be there? Were they desired there? It's a little bit of a different conversation. Which brings us to the sad story of, you guessed it, Codornices Village. Shout out to those of y'all who might have family staying in the village. So for those who do not know, there have always been blacks in Berkeley. Like if you go to South Berkeley historically has always been the concentration of black people in Berkeley. We'll talk about South Berkeley in a completely different video. At a certain point during the World War II era and sometime post that, there was that wartime public housing development in West Side Berkeley, in the west between Berkeley and kind of in Albany, called Codornices Village. Codornices Village, this came about because it's World War II. We funking with the Japanese and the German shit's bad, right? Most of y'all know that how a whole entire generation of blacks that came to the Bay Area came during this time. Red War. This is when they took down that ban of keeping blacks from working in the military, being in the Navy, even because we needed a lot of workers. This led to a lot of public housing projects popping up all around the Bay Area to house all these military workers to come out there. Because remember, in the Bay Area, this is where we built all of our warships, our cargo ships, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of y'all have grandparents that worked in the Kaiser Shipyards across the bay, and Marina Bay and Richmond's that, right? Codornices Village is an interesting story because Berkeley was against this shit. Berkeley was against it. Albany was against it for a plethora of reasons. Number one, I'm going to just say it, they didn't want blacks there. They was already pissed off with the 14, 15, however many black families they had in South Berkeley. They didn't want you Negroes coming there. That's one thing. Number two, they didn't like the idea of public housing in general coming there. Although they recognized the private builders and private developers there, although they recognized a need for wartime housing to house all these new workers that are coming there in the time of war, they didn't want to do public housing. Federal government said, okay, fuck that. We forget what y'all talking about. We're going to come there and build it anyway. The land of West Berkeley and kind of Albany too as well, the federal government leased that land. This is a very important part of the story. Pay attention. Leased that land from 60 different real estate owners there. So essentially they leased that land, and that's where they built these public housing projects, right? Which led to a plethora of blacks as well as whites too, although there was some segregation. When you went to Codornices Village back in the day, the west side was kind of like the more rundown side, the east side was kind of nicer. They had an elementary school that was on site there, which was very important because at that time, the school district in Albany was not letting black children attend there or didn't want them to attend there. You had a Codornices Village elementary school, as well as you also had a daycare center for them too as well. Although it, towards the end of its inception, was more majority black and Negro occupied, you had blacks, you had Asians there, and towards its later years post World War II, you did see integration of the residents there. Like for example, on the side which housed more blacks at the time, you started seeing more whites move, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why a lot of y'all don't know where the fuck this place is at is because it closed, I'll say, within 14 years of its inception. So what had happened is when World War II ended, at that time, the place stayed open just by year extension. Because I remember a lot of these public housing projects that opened up for wartime housing, they closed. When you go to Vallejo back in the day, all the housing products in Vallejo that were wartime housing, federal terrace, Floyd terrace, they closed. And this one was allowed to stay open for year extensions up until the Korean War time, right? The last 2 to 3, 4 years of it being open, there was a debate in between the federal government and Berkeley City Council because there was a law that went into effect afterwards that all these public housing projects that you had, all this wartime housing, that they would go into city management and state management when the federal government back off outside of wartime when we're done, we're out of war. Berkeley wasn't fucking with it. They were not messing with it. They didn't want all these Negroes because at this time, 1950, 1953, it was a majority Negro housing project. They did not want them staying there. They wanted them to get the fuck out. And here's where we get into the conversation of them getting kicked out of there in 1956, 1954, 1956, and getting forced to other different parts of the Bay Area. That Codornices Village that I'm talking about right now, that currently is University Village. That land, a lot of that land that was leased was indeed sold to UC, which basically UC Berkeley ended up becoming University Village. And when you go to University Village, I want to say they have some aspects of it where like it's dedicated towards the memory of Codornices Village. Like Kincaid was a very famous manager there, somebody there, and they have. I'm just getting this all wrong, not wrong, but it's an interesting story to talk about because it goes into. I guess we can talk about South Berkeley from that, right?